Hey, one more thing before you go. In a world filled with noise and distraction, there exists a sacred space where whispers of the soul are heard. Join us as we delve into the essence of existence and embark on a journey beyond the tangible, exploring the enigmatic reality of spirituality and transformative experiences. I'm thrilled to be joined by a remarkable medium, Julia Marie. She's an intuitive medium and a transdimensional energy healer. Together, we'll unravel the mysteries of the soul and venture into the depths of higher consciousness. I'm your host, Michael Hurst. Welcome to One More Thing Before You Go. My guest in this episode is Julia Marie. She's an intuitive medium and a trans-dimensional energy healer with over 3 decades experience helping awakening souls take their next steps on their spiritual path. She recently published her story, Signals from My Soul, a spiritual memoir of awakening, and is looking forward to sharing her insights with us. She offers consultation to a worldwide clientele and classes to anyone who seeks to discover or develop their unique connection to spirit. We all have it. We all know it. She just opens the door for us. She's a host of the popular podcast Evolving Humans. Welcome to the show, Julia.
So nice to be here with you, Michael. Can't wait to begin the discussion.
This is an amazing journey of life that you've had and where you've come from, and your spiritual awakening, I'm sure, really opened the doors and the windows and the eyes to your soul. So I'm kind of excited about learning all that.
Well, you will be driving the bus, so you'll let me know what parts you want to hear about.
Well, I like to start at the beginning. So where'd you grow up?
I was born and raised briefly in Rome, New York, and by the age of 8, I was living in Germany. So I was raised for most of my young childhood into to about the age of 18. I lived in Europe. So we came back to the States, and I've continued that military penchant for moving from place to place. So I've been everywhere.
Almost like that song, I've been everywhere, man, I've been everywhere.
Exactly.
But that's cool because it gives you a diverse opportunity to experience life from many different cultures and perspectives. And I think we as individuals and
Exactly.
humans really kind of need that.
Yeah, I agree.
So I know that would you did you go to college? Let's go back and ask that. I forgot about that. Did you go to university or college? What did you want to be when you grew up?
Well, I got a BA in psychology, and then when I was in the military, I also went to law school because I started having this urging to speak for people who had no voice, and I was unconscious at the time, so I translated that into lawyers speak for people who can't speak for themselves, so let me go to law school. Turns out that actually I was needing to speak for people who have no voices and also no bodies, but I didn't know that at the time.
Sometimes it takes a little bit more to open the door all the way. See, we can open it a crack maybe, and then realize that, oh, wait a minute, there's more out
Well, we
there.
get the signals. We get the signal, but we don't always interpret. Well, we do translate it based on our own level of consciousness at the time we receive the signal. And I'll be the first to admit, when I first started being called to a different life, I was still very much asleep. So it wasn't until many years later that I understood what speaking for people who had no voice actually meant.
It's a very interesting opportunity for you to be able to connect people with uh, what exists on the other side and what exists out there in the universe. And I think we're all connected to a point. I think we're all not to a point. I think we're all connected, and I think that the
Hmm.
consciousness expands itself with all of us. That the energy is something we all have in common. When did you first get the inkling that you had gifts or you had skills that you could use to help open doors like this?
It was until after the awakening actually happened for me that I became more aware of the natural wiring that I had. And I like to say we all have a set skill set and we're all wired the same. We all have the same potential. It just depends on how we access it and how much we work to improve that connection.
So let's talk about your awakening. When did that happen? Early age, middle age? Were you sleeping? What were you doing when it kind of hit you?
Well, I was conscious as a child. I heard the music of the spheres when I was 8 years old, remembered a past life when I was 9, but the household that I lived in was Catholic and a
Understand.
very logical father. So if you can't see it, hear it, feel it, taste it, or touch it, it's not real. And as a child, you want to survive. So I, like many of the people probably listening to your podcast right now, shut that down because of societal conditionings or input from people outside of ourselves. It wasn't safe to be who we authentically are. And that didn't come awake again until I was in my early 30s and in the military.
It's interesting. I think that I grew up Catholic as well, and so I understand that perspective. It is very strict in regard to what exists outside of the Catholic religion, actually, in my opinion. And in understanding that, it took me a little while. I'm not a practicing Catholic any longer, but I'm a very spiritual individual, and I have my beliefs in regard to many, many different things that do exist out there. I just don't resonate with the Catholic aspect of it. When I was a child growing up within that environment, I know what you experienced. It was, again, only certain people could talk to angels, and you're not one of them. And, only certain people can talk to God. You're not one of them. You have to come through a priest or, somebody within this environment that we're in right now. And then we as children, unfortunately, you mentioned societal norms. It's unfortunate that in society today, when we start seeing children opening their eyes to what is their quote imaginary friend that they're having tea with and having a conversation with, and then telling them that that doesn't exist, that they close that off. I don't know if it's society afraid of what exists. Well, I mean, what's your opinion on that?
Well, that's a tough one. I believe that most parents just want to be good parents, and I really believe that if they understood the impact they were having on their child by discounting whatever that experience is for the child, they might choose a different path. I believe that overall, those basic collective belief systems that we have are designed to keep us limited in our viewpoint, for lack of a better way to put it. So it's intentional, some of it, so that we don't rediscover who we are, actually.
I think, yeah, I agree with that. I also think that, at least from my experiences and some of these conversations, I've had like over 400 conversations now, most of them related to anything similar to this. I see a commonality within those conversations and within my own experiences that I think people are afraid of what's out there at times as well. If we get put into a mode of thinking, as you mentioned earlier, we get put into a mode where we train ourselves, almost like your father was in that position. My father was in that position. My mother was in that position. My grandfather, my grandmother. It goes generations. It's intergenerational that brings that forward. You can't see it, doesn't exist. You can't hold it, doesn't exist. This kind of a situation. I think that people like you that have come out and really explored what exists is a very positive thing for those around that are seeking those answers or that have maybe an inkling, or maybe have a curiosity or have experienced something they're not sure what it is, kind of a deal. For individuals like yourself that come out and take that to the next level for them, or open that door, open that window, open the eyes to the soul, are a very positive thing. You had an awakening again in your 30s. So, from that perspective, how did that change your life?
Well, before we move on, let me say that I wrote Signals from My Soul because of that fear that you spoke about, that people are afraid of something outside of themselves that they can't see or sense in any other way. And Signals from My Soul presents the perspective that the thing that you are fearing to connect with is your own higher wisdom. So it's not outside of you, it's something that's within. So the objective here is to go inside to find that connection that will then expand your awareness in an infinite way. So, getting back to your question, how did it change my life? Well, I went from active duty military to following the voice of my own inner guidance. I had spontaneous activation of healing energy that I didn't know at the time what was happening, but I suspect it was a Kundalini awakening. And I had round red circles appear on my body where the chakras, I later found out, were where chakras are. And the stripe about 2 inches wide up my back that let me know that it was energy rising from the base of my spine all the way up to my crown chakra.
That's really a unique opportunity, a unique experience, actually. I think, you got to be able to look at it, hear it, feel it, see it, which I think a lot of individuals don't get that opportunity. I know that you say that, everybody's awakening is unique to themselves, and the universe presents
Sure.
it when it's supposed to be presented. And I agree with that. I think that the universe will open the door to us or provide us with what we need to see, hear, feel when it feels that the time is right and that it's unique to each of us. When you kind of felt this unfolding and you kind of felt this developing from that perspective and seeing it as well as feeling it, did your soul talk to you and give you a message that you need to take this out to the world?
I went right into fear with all of it. I went because I didn't understand and I didn't have. Today, there's a lot of information out there that people can access. Some of it helpful and some of it maybe not so much, but there's a lot of information out there today. I didn't have that back in 1989 when all of this was happening for me. So I started asking questions and realized that I was hearing answers in my head and that I was having a conversation with some kind of sentient being. And so I applied my legal training to the situation and started cross-examining this field of intelligence because it wasn't an individualized being by any means. Although there was a period of time where a group of unseen teachers showed up and gave me the principles, and I share those in the book. But I guess I would say that over time I came to understand that there was a field of intelligence that was responsive and able to communicate with me at a level that I could understand. So, depending upon the question, I would get the answer that was commensurate with the level of consciousness with which I asked the question. And over the years, I've just refined that connection.
How does that relate to? I know that you're also a medium, correct?
Yes,
Now, I know that there's
that
several.
came later.
Okay, later. I know there's several different types of mediums. There are ones that see, ones that hear, ones that get the messages, audibly, and so forth. How does your mediumship work, may I ask?
I become aware of who they are, and it's almost as if I'm experiencing them personality wise, how they were in this life. So I would say I'm feeling, and I also know that to some degree or another, I'm a bit of a physical medium. There are certain things that sometimes will happen to me physically that manifest. I don't have any control over that, but and I haven't sought to develop the physical mediumship because I know it takes a lot of energy. So, but I mainly just become aware of them, and I would say it's probably my feeling sense that is the strongest when it comes to the mediumship.
So, yeah, and I bring that up because earlier in the beginning of the conversation, we were talking about how you gave voice to those that don't necessarily have a voice. You just didn't realize it came from a different area, kind of a situation. So, um, do you get spontaneous messages from people?
I will get spontaneous guidance having to do with my own life, but I don't. If you're speaking about I'm walking around out shopping or something, and all of a sudden that doesn't happen for me because I ask that it not happen for me. My deal with the spirit world is if you can get your person to sit in front of me some kind of way, I'll be happy to pass on the message.
I know that you heal. You have connection messages. You developed a coaching program. Is that correct?
I would say I have training program for both intuition and mediumship. I wouldn't call them coaching per se. I don't do life coaching stuff.
Okay.
I do train people how to recognize and strengthen their own particular way of connecting to spirit through both intuitive development and then a mediumship course. They're separate, but they're both
Separate things.
designed to, I guess, coach, but it's to facilitate one's own connection and understanding how that works
That's an interesting.
because everybody's different.
Everybody's different. Yes, I agree. Yeah, I agree with that. I know that you say that you refer to STEs, spiritually transformative experiences. We as a human being, do we all have the opportunity to have this experience?
Sure, in the same way that we could all have an NDE at any given moment, we can have spiritually transformative experiences. And I like to make a distinction because what in the beginning of my experience was a spiritually transformative experience, I would now say is my new normal. So I have the level of experience that comes now that I would put in a spiritually transformative category would be one that would expand my awareness beyond my current understanding. So it would have to be something pretty profound, I think, for it to fall in the category of spiritually transformative experience.
So we as individuals, like myself, I know that I have had a spiritually transformative experience many, many years ago, and how it changed my life and my perspective in regard to how I view spirituality, religion, the universe, what exists, how far the universe expands, the consciousness that we all have that's linked together, and this kind of a thing. How can somebody recognize if they're, I know that it's your new norm at the moment, but those out here who are watching and listening, how can they recognize that they are having or have had an STE? I almost said NDE. Hopefully, they won't have an
Okay.
NDE. We'll say
Well, I
STE.
like to say I didn't have to almost die. I'm grateful that I didn't have to have an NDE. So, anytime we have some sort of an encounter in our life that causes us to view the world differently from how we did before, I would say that's a spiritually transformative experience when it comes to our understanding of the nature of spirit.
Yeah, this is only to help educate people as well, out here, so we have a good
Sure.
understanding of that. Do you have to be
Yeah.
religious to have one of these?
No, I wasn't religious at the time. I too was raised as a Catholic, but I'm a very spiritual person. So no, you don't have to have a connection to religion in order to have one of these. You simply have to have an open mind and be willing to accept that some of the things that you might discount as not being real could very well be a spiritually transformative experience that goes unrecognized.
If somebody's starting to have one of these experiences and they get confused and they kind of abruptly stop it, but they want to explore it even more, there are tools and methodologies that can help them through re-experiencing that.
Well, here's what I know. The universe isn't going to give up on any of us. So if we have an opportunity to have such an experience and we miss it for whatever reason, we can either actively ask for another opportunity to have that experience so that we can recognize it, or we can know that for sure someday, some way, it will come to us again from the field because it's a wake-up call. I'm pretty certain looking back that I received more than one call to awaken, and it wasn't until they got out the spiritual 2x4 and hit me upside the head that, because I was being very stubborn. I was very linear and 3D, and yes, I was sensitive a little bit and slightly intuitive. I mean, I used to be able to know things about people, but in general, I wasn't into all of the spiritual stuff that was out there. And it wasn't until I started having my own experiences in a very extreme way that I realized, oh, some of these other things that happened earlier in my life, like the spontaneous remembering of a past life and the hearing of the music of the spheres, were also spiritually transformative experiences that went unrecognized by me.
That's really interesting that you brought up something, the music of the spheres.
Mm-hmm.
Can you help us understand what that is?
Well, or maybe the sound of creation, I guess. I wrote about it in the book, but I'll give you briefly. When I was 8, we were on a road trip from Colorado to California. We were on the third day of it, 9 people packed into a very large old school station wagon, and the car got a flat tire in the foothills of California. My dad pulled off into a rest stop. Everybody piled out, and of course my rowdy brothers started fighting. And I just wanted some peace and quiet, so I kind of walked away from the group and found myself being drawn into the skyline of where the mountains were, and then my eyes went up into the stars. And I remember standing there in the stillness, and all of a sudden I was hearing voices, like layers and layers of like voices. It was all sound. There were no words, just sounds, tones. And when I listened to the whole thing, it was harmonious, but I could pick out different notes in between. And when I realized I wasn't hearing that with my physical ears, that I was in this field of sound, I came back into my body and the sound quit. Now, when I was
Interesting.
in my 30s, just prior to the awakening, I told a friend of mine who was an experienced meditator. I told him about this experience, and he goes, people meditate their whole lives to hear that. He says, that's like the sound, that's like the Om, that's like the sound of creation, he said. But I didn't know at the time that's what it was. I just knew I was hearing something not with my ears, and it scared me.
From that perspective, that's
So
that's
fear shut
interesting.
everything down.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the first time I've heard it. I've heard that actually in all these talks that I've had. That's the reason I wanted to ask you about that because I never heard it presented that way. So that's it. It. Uh, my mind is racing in like a 50 million directions now.
It's okay.
So, so when you experienced this, how old were you? May I ask?
I was 8,
8
years
years
old.
old. So you still had the innocence of a child, but the openness to be able to understand a little bit of what the universe was presenting to you, and you got the unique opportunity to experience and hear it. which I think is an amazing, amazing opportunity, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't even know how long it lasted. It could have been just a brief instant, but it felt like forever. And then, soon as I realized, oh, this isn't a sound coming through my physical ears, I went back to my normal human state and ran back to the car. So,
Time
yeah,
is a construct, as they say, that, it's different when you go up in the universe. On the
exactly.
other side, it's all different. So let's talk about, you mentioned past lives. I know that growing up a Catholic, we didn't believe in past lives or future lives or reincarnation or anything like that. What's your perception of past lives and reincarnation? Do we come back and get to do it all over again? Do we learn new lessons each time that we come back, or does it take us time to get to different levels of where we end up going home finally?
Well, it depends on your perspective. So, if we're talking about it from the perspective of the aspect of me that lives in a three-dimensional reality, which includes the dimension of time, which is linear, that means every lifetime that I've experienced prior to this one would be considered past, and every lifetime after that would be considered future. Now, from the perspective of my soul, and I do this drawing every time somebody comes for a past life reading, I should just make a graphic of it so I can hold it up and show them. But from the perspective of the soul, if you imagine a horizontal line that is time, and put yourself somewhere on the timeline, and then above you draw a beautiful oval and label that soul, and then put rays coming down from the soul. Those are all the lifetimes that your soul is experiencing simultaneously with this one. So, is it past or future? No, it's all one life from the perspective of the soul. That's just my understanding. So, starting from that point, my consciousness is focused in this lifetime right now for some reason. And I personally believe that reason is that I can make changes here in this lifetime that impact other lifetimes my soul may be experiencing on the timeline. So I can change both my future and my past by making adjustments to this incarnation. So if we're going to use it from the perspective of, yes, we have a timeline, then I'm going to say that we do continue to reincarnate until we, quote unquote, get it right. We we learn whatever lessons we designed for our existence here to learn. And then when we're finished here in this school, we take our next step.
I agree with that. I think that our perception of the reality we're in at the moment can also allow us to connect with where we were in the past and where we may be going in the future as well. Again, that's my perspective. I think that I love, if you ever make that graphic, please send me a copy. I'll attach it to this episode
Okay, I will.
and overlay it so that
Okay.
when we talk about it, it will give somebody more of a visual perspective. Because I think that what a brilliant way to be able
Sure.
to show that. I think that it gives us a very visual to help us understand that whole concept of the past and the present and the future and how it's all connected to us. Do you believe? Do you think? Or do you believe in karma?
Oh, that's a touchy one too. Do I believe in karma? Well, why don't you define karma for me so I know what we're talking about?
Well, I know that you think about somebody that, look, I'm a retired police sergeant. I'm a cop. I spent my career in law enforcement. I put a lot of bad people in jail for many things.
Mhm.
So, in regard to that, to me, then they have the opportunity to continue to experience bad karma if they come back, when they come back, kind of a situation. On the other hand, you may have somebody that's very philanthropic, that's very charitable, that shares their wealth, shares their humanity, shares their compassion. They would bring forth good karma. So, from that perspective, so if we pass that good karma on in our life, you can't see my Italian hands moving, but they're moving everywhere.
That's okay. I do the same thing.
If so, if somebody is spreading the compassion, the humanity in their opportunity to improve people's lives. To me, that's bringing good karma, and that karma then pays us forward. If I was a murderer or in a domestic violence, I mean, I dealt with all the negativity of life for so many from so many angles, and for so
Mhm.
long. You know, you see the worst people, and you see the best people at their worst, and you kind of walk away from that going, I wonder if they're ever going to get theirs, kind of a deal, karma. So I guess more along that line.
But if we're gonna talk about that, the operation of that from the perspective of the soul, how can I, at this level of awareness, discern whether what that person, the person, let's say a person who is a really bad guy in this life, and you put him away, how do we know what the soul intended to learn from this incarnation? So maybe the putting them in jail is the karma from something they did at some other time,
Mm.
on some other point of their soul's timeline. And the balancing is occurring by them now spending life in prison or
Mm.
whatever.
That makes sense. Yeah, it's a unique
We have a
perspective.
limited mind. Yeah, we have a limited mind, and we must always remain mindful, my personal opinion, that we can't know the workings of the soul. We can only maybe intimate or think we can figure things out. We can't positively know the reason why good things happen to, I mean, bad things happen to good people. I mean, people say that all the time. Well, somewhere in there, the soul had a certain goal when it incarnated to have that experience for whatever reason. Sometimes we can't explain it at our level of awareness.
It's a very unique explanation of that. I've talked about karma in the past with other individuals that have come on, and understanding where you have come from a spiritual perspective. I just wanted to kind of delve into that a wee bit, and I think that that's a
Mhm.
I like that answer. I think that it resonates with me. And I had some of that I hadn't thought about is that maybe the soul says that they're supposed to spend life in prison. The soul says that they're supposed to, do this, do that,
For
and
whatever their learning is, we don't know that. Yeah.
learn what it's like to be an inmate.
But I come from a place where, exactly, I come from a place where I understand that this physical body is the avatar for my soul. This is the vehicle that was created by my soul for its own purposes in this lifetime. I am not the one in control. I'm the piece on the game. I'm the piece on the game board. So the more I allow my soul to drive the bus, the more my soul's purpose is fulfilled. So surrender is always the suggested
Right.
choice
Well, I
when
think that
given
we,
one. Yeah.
and that goes back to our spiritual senses, as you had mentioned. The spiritual senses unfold organically, and sometimes,
Mhm.
again, it's help us to understand that if somebody's starting, how does that work? Let me ask you this question this way: how do our spiritual senses unfold organically, so somebody can recognize what's taking place and maybe open their eyes or their ears a little bit more?
Okay, so for every physical sense, you have a spiritual or non-physical analog or component that is functions in the same way. You have physical sight, you have spiritual sight, you have physical hearing, you have spiritual hearing, you have physical feeling, you have spiritual feeling. Now, you can probably find out through doing any one of those communicating surveys that say, when somebody says, do you understand? You say, I hear you, or I feel you, or yes, I know. Those kinds of ways that use language will tell you what your strongest physical sense is. It's highly likely that your strongest spiritual sense is also that one. So, in other words, I'm very visual. I started out strongly clairvoyant, but I worked really hard to develop my feeling sense because I know it's more dependable. The data that comes to the physical body is more reliable than my clairvoyance, for example. I may not always know what a bridge means when I see a bridge in a communication, but I can feel what it means. So I always ask for the context in the body. So once you're, as you, if a person decides to begin to develop their non-physical senses, their soul senses, their spiritual senses, whatever you want to call them, if they decide to do that through practice or any kind of exercises, meditation, anything you want to do to build those up, you will find that each one, whatever your strongest one, if you focus on that one first, it will develop to its maximum potential at a certain level. Then your next strongest one comes online. You'll begin to, if you label your input, let's say, oh, I'm seeing this and I'm hearing this, you will soon find that behind your strongest physical sense will come your next strongest spiritual sense. And so it's like a lotus flower opening up. And the beauty of this whole process, if you don't have a limiting belief that you ever are finished with spirit, because with spirit there's always more, what you'll find is that your next level of your spiritual sensings will come like a bud out of the center of that fully opened lotus and begin to develop in the same way, also organically. So we can continue to expand our awareness of all of our senses for as long as we walk in a physical body. And it's an organic process. Just pay attention to it.
You just have to, yeah, learn to pay attention to it. I think that we, again, from childhood, I do believe, and I've learned and experienced through these conversations, actually, that there's a large portion of our population that have blinders on for many things and many reasons, we'll say. You mentioned that your physical body holds the records of our entire existence. So if my physical body holds the records of my entire existence, do we have the opportunity to access those records?
Yes, I make that statement about the physical body holding the records, all of our records, because I've had some of them spontaneously activate. And well, where did they come from? They were coming from my physical body. Like a past life came out of my knee one time, like a film strip. My knee was hurting, and then when I asked Spirit why it was hurting, I saw the past life. And when I recognized that was the past life connected to the knee, the pain in the knee went away. So that record, it was time for me to see that record and understand that the body has that information.
That's pretty
So
interesting,
I
actually.
don't have any magical tool that says here's how you do it. I would assume a person could sit quietly and ask the body's intelligence to reveal something about themselves, and I feel like there would be a response. And then you just have to believe what you receive. That's the other piece.
That makes sense. Yeah, that's pretty cool, actually. I think that just the mere aspect that we can take the opportunity to go back and indulge in our past lives, for example, and see what we've brought forward from there, and then why and how did it affect us presently and what we're doing now, whether it be positive
Yep.
or negative. To recognize both the positive and the negative. I think that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that we can bring positives from the past lives as well, to maybe emphasize what we need to recognize in doing today, to be more compassionate, maybe to be more human, to be more aware of those around us and society and cultures and people, and be a better person.
Well, some of us have spent lifetimes developing our non-physical senses too, so that we could be of service in that way. I mean, many people that have spontaneous activation of healing were probably healers in another lifetime in some form or fashion. I believe it's more about remembering the ways we can serve others and bringing them forward into this lifetime.
Which I think is a good thing. I mean, my mantra is to
Yeah.
inspire, motivate, and educate. And I think that it took me a little while to come to that conclusion, and that was what Spirit talked to me, and that's the reason that's why I do this podcast, because I want to be able to inspire, motivate, and educate
Hmm.
people into moving their lives forward in a positive way. But not that I didn't
Yeah.
do that as a police
Mine,
officer.
mine's educate, enlighten, inspire, empower. So it's pretty much along the same
Yeah,
lines. We
along the
want
same
to
line.
educate, we want to enlighten them, and then empower them to move forward in whatever way will allow them to
Yeah,
achieve their soul's highest potential.
it's a good thing. It's a good thing. It's a good thing.
Yeah, it
Had you
is.
had you always wanted to be an
Hmm.
author?
No, I did not. I did not always want to be an author. I did not want to write this book. Okay, that's why it took me 30 years. However, and I spent all of, what is this, 2024? So I spent all of 2023 writing this book.
Oh,
And I believe, I got a message 30 plus years ago that I was here to facilitate the growth of many on this planet, in this plane, in this lifetime. It is by information passed from us through you to them that such facilitation shall take place. And I said, I don't want to channel, I don't want to write. And I wrote another book that's been written for 4 years that hopefully will come out later this year now that I've written Signals from My Soul. But when people read that other book, they kept saying, you need to tell us more about yourself. Because I was just talking about how to be intuitive. I wasn't talking about how I came to be that way. And so I was inspired by, well, Betty Kovach. She wrote Merchants of Light. She also wrote the foreword to this book. And in her book, she told honestly about her experiences with spirit. And I thought, well, if this, you know, titan of metaphysics can do this, then I suppose I can too. So that's what actually got me going writing this story. And I just pulled the stories that were the best examples that would show people many different things, many different aspects of the spiritual journey, and also the arc of going from a place of fear and confusion to a place of confidence and understanding and comfort with moving in the world in a new way. That's all I'm doing.
perspective. What inspired you to do training?
The people asking me to teach them what I knew and how I knew it, that came 15 years ago. So I've been teaching for since the early thousands, 2000s, I guess. Yeah, so it's been 15 years maybe
Been a
since I've
while.
started teaching intuitive development. Yeah.
So I'm
And then the
Joseph.
mediumship came later.
From that perspective, what did you do in the military? May I ask? What was your
Well,
MOS?
well, it was an AFSC because I was too smart to be in the Army. I was in the Air Force. So
Uh,
no, no, no,
hey, look, a
no
Navy. You're
slight.
talking to a
Okay,
Navy
but I
guy,
was,
so
I was
it's. I understand.
okay. Then you're safe. One of my brothers was in the Navy, so I was an aircraft. I went into aircraft maintenance, and I had some personal family reasons for choosing an AFSC that would put me. Big planes meant big bases.
Hmm.
So that meant if I'm on a big base, I can probably take my child with me because I was a single mom. So I wanted to make sure I wasn't on a mountaintop somewhere because I also had really high foreign language skills. And they actually asked me to go into, foreign language, but I knew that could put me on the top of a mountain somewhere with a headset on. So I turned it down and kept my aircraft maintenance technician AFSC, and then the commander found out I had college education. Next thing I know, I'm his resource advisor for the squadron. So that gave me the opportunity to go to school at night because now I can work just during the day. So
Very
it
cool.
worked, everything worked out as it was supposed
The
to. Yeah,
universe puts you where you're supposed to be. Totally, wholeheartedly believe that. So
exactly.
it took me forever to really come
Even when
to
we don't know, that's what's happening. Yeah.
exactly. It took me. I got injured in line of duty, and it stopped my career.
Hmm.
And I was in a wheelchair for a little bit. I've been through 8 operations to put myself back together. Or I should say, they put me back together. But
Yeah.
to recognize that I was angry, I was resentful, I was mad because my career was cut short. Those people around me were moving up the line. They were becoming, I was a sergeant, I was going to be a lieutenant. There were people that went on to be friends of mine that I worked with, that were partners or worked under me, went on to be assistant chiefs, captains, commanders, things like that. And I was angry for the longest time.
Yeah.
But then something came about and it changed my life as well. And when it did, I can do this podcast. I can talk to people in 59 different countries. I can interview people in 59 different countries.
Exactly.
And I never would have had that opportunity as a police officer. I got to see people in the public, but, most people who have unfortunately, most people who have encounters with a police officer, you're either a victim or a criminal. 90%, 95% of the people who have any kind of contact with a police officer, you're either a criminal or you are a victim. There's the other part that they obviously have community resource officers now. They've got school resource officers and so forth. But, in that perspective, there's a community policing orientation that is now evolving, which I'm happy for from that perspective. But, I'm in a completely different world at the moment, and I don't have to work nights, I don't have to work holidays, and I don't have to work weekends. And I don't have to have anybody point a gun at me and pull a knife on me, or worry about whether or not I'm coming home from work to my family, or my wife doesn't have to worry about, my kids don't have to worry about whether or not I wasn't coming home. So universe puts you where you're supposed to be at that time, and sometimes we just have to recognize it and walk that path.
Well, it was an injury that took me out too. I pushed a power unit on the flight line and messed up my back for the rest of my life. And it was eventually that injury that that moved me out of active duty military service and disability retired me. And then the awakening happened right after that. So that's the
We have that in
sequencing of events. I
commonality.
didn't have the awakening when I was in the military. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. It
we have
was a
that in
really
common.
severe injury that changed my life and the trajectory of my life.
Oh, that's interesting that we have that in common. Hey, speaking of
hmm
common, let's tell everybody how to get in touch with you, please, and where to get your books. And you have a podcast, and you have some training.
Yes, well, they can find pretty much everything at the website that's listed here on the video, www.juliamarie.us. And Signals from My Soul is available on Amazon. And I have an offer for anybody that listens to this podcast within 2 weeks of its show air date. If you send me proof of purchase of Signals from My Soul to me at julia@juliamarie.us, I'll put you in a drawing for an opportunity to receive a free 30-minute reading from me. And hopefully the link will be in the show notes. And then The Last Breath is a book that I was a contributing author to that tells one of my mediumship experiences. The things that I offer run the gamut from consultations, individual consultations, energy healing. So the life guidance is anything you want clarity about. I also do formal mediumship readings that are just spirit communication if you want to hear from your loved ones. And then the trainings are through the Academy for the Intuitive Arts, and there are some ongoing trainings, like I said, intuition, mediumship, and then smaller courses like how to work with your spirit guides or connecting with your own higher self through spirit, I call it soul writing, those kinds of things. And you can get a free 7 intuition hacks thing just if you want to get started. It's a simple free giveaway, just going to the website and click on the link.
I'll make sure all that stuff's in the show notes so everybody can, be able to connect with you when this airs.
Perfect.
I'll let you know when it airs so that you know when the 2-week deadline starts, and I'll make sure that
Yeah.
information's in those show notes as well, so people have a way of connecting with you and hopefully getting more involved with what you're doing. And you have a wonderful podcast. I've listened to it. It's called Evolving Humans. I found it on Spotify, found it on Apple. found it on, I'm assuming just about
Mhm.
favorite platform, whatever your favorite platform happens
It's
to
on
be.
all the platforms, yeah.
So you
Yeah.
can listen to it there as well. Julia, thank you very much for coming on the show. I really appreciate you sharing your wisdom and your journey with me. I think that what an amazing opportunity that you have been given to bring a gift to the world in regard to what exists beyond and how to connect with that existence. So thank you.
Well, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed this time today. I really appreciate it.
Well, once again, this is one more thing before you go. So, do you have any words of wisdom you can share before we go?
If you're trying to open yourself up to all of your greater potential, I would say be patient and know that the universe has your back, and that if you ask for guidance, you will receive a response. That would be what I would say. So have faith in yourself and your ability to make and maintain that connection.
Brilliant words of wisdom. Brilliant words of wisdom. Thank you for giving those as well. So, again, thank you very much for being here. I really appreciate it. For everyone that's watching and listening, thank you very much for being a part of One More Thing Before You Go family. And one more thing before you all go, have a great day, have a great week, and thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to this episode of One More Thing Before You Go. Check out our website at beforeyougopodcast.com. You can find us as well as subscribe to the program and rate us on your favorite podcast listening platform.